Welcome to our second annual leadership workshop. We started this last year in order to give the volunteers the tools they need. We realized we ask a lot of our volunteers, we throw them on committees and don't tell them all the ins and outs of serving a government committee. And this year we decided to extend our invitation, and so I want to welcome friends from Chatham, especially Mayor Harris. Thank you for spreading the word, and thank you for joining us this morning. Last year we ran this on Groundhog's Day, and I decided that, early February, you run up against bitter cold weather and the threat of foot snowstorm, so let's move it to March, so we're past all that, so I'm glad we did that. Yeah. As Mayor Harris and I know, that's our life. You plan, and it just doesn't work sometimes. All right, this is what we're going to be covering. We're going to, in a few seconds, going to give each of you a chance to introduce yourselves. We're going to be talking about committee responsibilities from Matt Giacobbe, I'll introduce shortly. And then committee responsibilities from the clerk's perspective. Elizabeth Osborne, the clerk of Madison, will be sharing those. And then I'm going to be sharing tips on how to run effective meetings. I'm still learning, but I'll share them anyway. And then we'll do a little interactive time where you get to meet each other and share your committee's goals and present that back quickly. And then we'll adjourn, and then you'll go out and do great things on our committees. So, introductions. We're going to go around this room. We have about 20 people, so we're going to keep this moving very quickly. We're expecting almost 30, so we may have some people coming in here. Quickly state your name, the committee you're on, and one sentence reason you're on that committee. So I'm Bob Conley, Mayor Borough Madison. I was trying to figure out why I'm on that committee, but it's just, I've been serving Madison for a while, and I think it just came to the time. I said, there's another way I can serve the town, and that's what I decided to do. But obviously, it was a little tougher to as opposed to just being appointed. But I'm proud to be the mayor and very happy that I'm there. Bruce?
Okay. And I do it because I love Chatham Borough, and I love being able to contribute to Chatham Borough. So I hope that when my term is over, that I will have left Chatham Borough a better place.
Hi, my name is Len Resto. I'm a former councilman in Chatham Borough. Right now I'm on the Environmental Commission, and I'm chairing the Train Centennial Commission. And I just serve because I love public service and I like to give back to the community.
I'm Vic Schumacher. I serve as president of the Adult School Board and a member of the Patriotic Celebration Committee. And why do I do this? I guess I'm a glutton for punishment.
Pat Sherwood, I'm on the Patriotic Celebration Committee, and it's just payback, that's all.
Ron DiBiase, Patriotic Celebration Committee, and wrong place, wrong time.
I'm John Ayer. I'm from Chatham Borough also, and I'm on the Affordable Housing Committee. Why? Because I enjoy serving.
Connie Stober, I'm on Affordable Housing in Madison and also the Health Department, and those are areas I'm particularly interested in.
Christine Hammett, Shade Tree Management Board, and just to help.
I'm Kay Leary. I'm on the Senior Citizen Advisory Board, and I represent the Thursday Morning Club. Why? I can't say no, I guess.
Kathy Coltis, Open Space and Parks Committee. Lived in Madison for a long, long time, and I love to volunteer, and it's a great town.
Paul Alaco, Parks Committee. Kathy roped me into being on the Parks Committee.
Bob McDowell, I'm on the Parks Committee and the MRC. I'm also on the board of the Morris County League of Women Voters. And since I'm retired, just trying to spend some time helping out local issues and things.
Hi, I'm Mike Barrasso. I am chair of the Madison Community Garden Advisory Committee, and I got involved in that because I thought it offered the potential to offer a wonderful opportunity for service to community.
Oh, okay, great.
My name is Mark Fabianski, representing the Madison Downtown Development Commission. I am co-vice chair and the chairman of the Public Improvement Committee. A few years ago, my family moved into Madison, and we immediately fell in love with the town. And we moved in June, and actually in October, we came to our first Bottle Hill Day, and that was the first year of the beer garden. I think there was something in the beer or the wine that they were serving, because I immediately got involved in volunteering and never looked back. It's been a wonderful experience.
John Hoover, I'm on the board of the Museum of Early Trades and Crafts, and also a member of the Operations Committee for the Strategic Planning Initiative in the borough. I do this because I've always volunteered, and I think that we have an obligation as citizens to participate, understand what's going on in the government, and give back to the community.
Lois Spott, Commissioner, Madison Housing Authority, and I do it because I really believe in public housing.
Hi, Diane Driscoll. I'm on the Madison Housing Authority as a commissioner, and I'm also on the Zoning Board of Adjustment. I do it because I enjoy it. I think it's great to help contribute to what's going on in town and keep all the really good things going that are going.
Ron Potter, I'm on the zoning board as well and the electric utility, and basically just to help the town remain a comfortable and comfortable place to be.
That's all right. Tony DeRosa, I'm on the zoning board as well as the newly formed strategic planning committee. And my purpose in serving is primarily to help Madison stay as good looking as it's always been and perhaps even improve it.
I'm Carmela Vitale. Besides councilperson, I am here representing the Senior Citizen Advisory Committee. It's one of my favorite committees that I serve on. They're a group of very important residents, and I love serving with them. I'm also a trustee of Affordable Housing Commission, which I believe in affordable housing very strenuously. So it's always an honor to serve this town.
Bob Landrigan, excuse the voice, Borough Council President. In addition to that, I am the borough's OEM coordinator and president of the Board of Health. I serve on a number of committees. And why do I do it? Well, my wife will tell you, so I get out of the house. But the reality of it is, I believe that to have a strong community, you should be committed to giving back and volunteering. And I am very committed to that. Thank you.
Take the mics off. There we go.
Hi, I'm Joe Santoro. I'm chairman of the Board of Adjustment, or the Zoning Board. And I mean, I certainly wanted to give back, but by profession, I'm a banker and I have some legal background, and I felt like I'm always in front of boards, or often in front of retirement boards and state treasurers and committees and things like that for investment commissions, and I felt like those skill sets that I have are something I could leverage into zoning decisions and try and do things that would help the town. So it's really trying to leverage my skill sets to kind of give back.
I'm Mary Lewis from the Madison Environmental Commission, and I just wanted to give a little shove or a push that everyone's aware of the Green Fair, which will be held in late April. And we're just trying to raise all our citizens' awareness of what's available out there as far as to improve the environment. And who doesn't want the environment to get more purified and for us to be more responsible citizens?
I'm John Solu, Madison's Historic Preservation Commission. And why do I do this? I don't know. I graduated from Madison High School and many, many years ago. And I feel it's our duty as citizens to give back to the community that gave us so much to be thankful for. And so to that end, I work not only on Madison's Historic Preservation, but on Chatham's Historic Preservation Commission, and I'm a member of the Morris County Historic Preservation Trust that this year, last year, we were able to get funding for Geraldine to have at least part of the funding and move it into Madison. So there's a lot going on, and we need a lot of people to volunteer and step up to the plate, both at the Madison, the towns, surrounding towns, and also throughout the county to help preserve, that's part of my duty, is preserve the historic assets that we have for our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Thank you.
Doug is here for support, so we'll, Doug Osborne, or he is the other half with Liz, so welcome, Doug. We go through these introductions obviously for two reasons. One, we want to find out who's in the room, but as we talk about why we join committees, you hear the varied answers and you hear the passion, and that's what makes committees work, but sometimes provides challenges to committees, and we'll be talking about that later, because if you have varied reasons to be on the committee and you come with such a passion, you know, you're going to get involved sometimes, and you might some get fired up sometimes, and so we'll talk about how you deal with that. So, but before we really get into things, key thing about volunteers is appreciation. So thank you for being a volunteer. Thank you for giving up your Saturday morning. Thank you for volunteering on a committee. Thank you for stepping forward in a leadership role for those that are chairs, vice chairs, or probably soon to be chairs. And thank you for serving the residents of Madison and Chatham. It really is the volunteers that make a difference in our communities. Now I'm just going to have a little fun, and if those who were here last year, you saw these quotes before, but I think it really describes committees, and I call these committee misconceptions. To get something done, a committee should consist of no more than 3 people, 2 of whom are absent. Milton Berle couldn't have said it better. A committee is a group that keeps minutes and loses hours. A camel looks like a horse that was planned by a committee. To kill time, a committee meeting is a perfect weapon. Meetings are indispensable when you don't want to do anything. And this next slide are some of my own quotes and some from others, but what I call committee conceptions, as opposed to misconceptions. It is a collection of dedicated volunteers with a common destination, but they do come with different roadmaps. And for full disclosure, I did share this at every year at the end of the year, we get together with the council, mayor and council, and have a year-end dinner. And my toast was, you know, here's a dinner table of people that probably wouldn't arrange to get together to have dinner. But we are celebrating a year's worth of work. But that creates a great tossed salad of ideas. And the key is a salad, because you can see the distinct parts in there, but you throw it all together and it works well. And another key thing, because I'm in the nonprofit world and volunteers are so important because they serve as multipliers out in the community. So by having committee chairs, committee members, you are going out into the community representing the council, the mayor, and everything that the town does. So that's what committees are all about. And now I'm going to take a little break, and we're going to shift to our attorney. Matthew Giacobbe came initially on board in Madison as our labor attorney, and has now taken on also the role as borough attorney for Madison. He represents many communities as a borough attorney and labor attorney, and we really appreciate his expertise, and he will now share that with you. And hopefully everyone has the handout. If not, we can get them to you. And we're using this microphone not because we are recording this, that's why we're using the mic.
Good morning, everyone. I gave you a handout that you don't have to, I'm not going to go through it line by line, so I'm just going to speak to you this morning. How much time do I have? 3 hours. All right, well, I bill for 6, so. Yeah, on a Saturday morning, it's just, a little cruel and unusual, but, we love the mayor, so we'll do this for the mayor. The reality is, when you serve in any type of capacity on a committee, as a volunteer, I heard, historic preservation committee, affordable housing, etc. There are a couple of very important things that you have to be cognizant of. One is there's this law, and it's called Oprah. It's not the talk show hostess, it's the Open Public Records Act. This law has created a cottage industry of attorneys and others who use it really as a weapon to make legal fees. And what is the Open Public Records Act? It's a law that's designed that any public record that's not confidential in nature, and I'll get into that in a little while, is a public record that has to be disclosed. And if a borough or a municipality or a township gets an Oprah request and they don't disclose records that are in their possession, and the other side files a lawsuit and they prevail, you have to pay all their attorney's fees. And I'll talk to you about that in a second. So this is a very, very dangerous law. And so a lot of people who are volunteers say, well, I just use my own personal computer. I just use my own personal Gmail. That's not a public record, and it is. So basically, anything that touches on borough business, if you're emailing about the time of a meeting, you're emailing about what was discussed at a meeting, you're emailing about the location of a meeting, those are all public records, every one of them. And just because it's on your own private email doesn't mean that it's not a public record. So what I suggest that you do is you use official emails, don't mix them with your personal. And what I tell all the council is use a dedicated email to township business. Don't use your work email. And why is that? Because if an Oprah request comes in and the clerk, who's the custodian of records, gets the request, she has to, and I'll give you an example. We just got an Oprah request in for a school board recently, and they said, we want all of the emails between the superintendent and all of the board members on their personal emails, public emails, etc. So the clerk then has to go and say, go to your home emails, anything that touches on board business, I need to have. Go to your work emails, anything that touches on board business, I need to have. And you have to gather all that stuff. And the problem with that is that a lot of places of employment, and I had one case where it was, I think it was Colgate-Palmolive, they weren't real happy that the person was using their work email for borough business. So my suggestion to you is separate the two. Don't have your personal life email and your borough email commingled. You want to have one email that you're doing borough business on, and that's it. The reason is it's twofold. A, protect your privacy, your volunteers. You don't need me going through all your emails to see whether something should be redacted or not. Two, it makes Liz Osborne's job a lot easier because she can go to one server, pull up all the emails on the given topic, and then produce them. So it's very, very important that you just think about that. The other thing you have to think about, and we're watching it right now with this whole Bridgegate fiasco. A lot of the emails, if you've seen them, they were from Gmail accounts, they were from other accounts. They were not, State of New Jersey or Port Authority. But they touched on business. Those are disclosable. And what I tell people is when you write an email, assume that when you write that email and you hit send, the whole wide world's going to read it. It's going to end up on the front page of the paper. It's going to end up in your adversaries' political literature, whatever it could be. When you hit send, be prepared that if you're writing something in that email, you're not going to be embarrassed by it, regretful of it, because it could end up being on the front page of the Daily Record, the Star Ledger, etc. And people write emails like they talk. It's, what I try to do when I write letters, opinions, memos, etc., I never do it in an email. What I do is I write a memo or a letter. And the reason I do that is I dictate the letter or I dictate the memo. My secretary types it up. She gives it back to me. I write, go through it with a red line, give it back. By the time it goes out, it's gone back and forth 3 or 4 times. And I've had the ability to look at it, digest it. Is that how I wanted to say that sentence? People, when they write emails, they don't do that. People, when they text, they don't do that. What they do is they just do it, hit send. It's almost conversational. The other problem, too, is that emails and texts, they're recorded, and you can't get rid of them. They don't go away. They're there forever. So what ends up happening with emails and texts is under the Open Public Records Act, and I'll give you an example. I represent a town where there was a gentleman running against an assembly candidate, assembly person. And the assembly person, who is a sitting assembly person, his chief of staff serves on the governing body. And it was a very, very contentious election season. This was several years ago. And the chief of staff was sitting up on the dais and was texting from her phone. What was she texting? She was texting her husband to make sure that he picked up a kid from dance and get Johnny's homework done. She was just doing the texting. The adversary who was running against them was out in the audience and saw the texting and assumed that the texts were between the assembly person and the chief of staff so that she could answer questions a certain way to attack this person. The next morning, we had an Oprah request for all of her text messages. So we had to go to Verizon. It becomes very, very problematic. We had to print out screenshots. Turns out there was nothing there. But people realize that if they can get a little nugget in a text message or an email, that's where they go. So just be cognizant of the Open Public Records Act. When you're doing an email or a text message, if it's borough business, I urge you to use a dedicated email account through the borough, through Rosenet. And the other reason that it's important is that there's a division in New Jersey called DARM, the Division of Archive Records Management. And DARM is an agency that is there to preserve public records. We're not allowed to go in. Liz and I can't go down right now and say, oh, those emails last week were pretty bad. Let's just delete the server of those emails. We can't do that. Those are official records. The borough does not have permission to destroy any records unless they have express written permission and an order from the Division of Archive Records Management. So, for example, you might see people taping a meeting. They'll tape a meeting, a clerk will tape a meeting to take notes. That clerk can't go and destroy that tape unless they have an order from DARM to, once they've created the minutes, to then reuse the tape. So there's a whole body that says, don't wreck these records. So the other thing, too, is a lot of people think by hitting delete, you're getting rid of the email. Well, the person who got it has the email. And the big problem becomes is if you've been sending out emails and you delete them and get rid of them, and there's an Oprah request, Liz Osborne says, we don't have any of those records, nothing responsive. The person comes forward and says, oh yeah, here it is, because I have it, I kept it. And so people do that to basically catch you to say you violated the Open Public Records Act, and you failed to disclose a document that was an official document. Now, what's the danger of this? The danger of it is a very tight time frame. When you get a request in for an Open Public Records Act request, you have 7 days after receipt to comply. 7 days is not a lot of time. That one case I was telling you about in the Board of Ed, it produced 30,000 pages of emails. I don't know about you, but going through 30,000 pages of emails takes quite a bit of time. You can ask for an extension to respond within that time. And the Open Public Records Act can't say, give me every email that Mayor Connolly wrote. That's not appropriate. But it could say, give me every email that Mayor Connolly wrote to the Open Space Committee about the acquisition of, ABC lot. Got to be narrowly tailored so you can do it. It's not a fishing expedition. And the other thing that the Open Public Records Act also does not require us to do is we don't have to create documents. So sometimes we'll get a document and say, please create a spreadsheet of all the employee salaries. We don't have to do that. If we have it, we have to produce it. So what happens is when we get these Open Public Record Act requests in, we have to very quickly analyze and see, is it compliant with law? Is it specific enough that we can respond to it? And then if it's going to produce a huge amount of emails or documents or time, we then have a duty to go back to the requester and say, we need additional time. We'd like a 2-week extension, a 3-week extension to comply. Now, what happens is when we get these document requests in, and that one for 30,000 pages, Liz Osborne and I then have to go through all of them to make sure that there's not things that need to be excluded. So what are items that can be excluded from an Open Public Records Act request? Attorney-client privilege communications. So if I write to the council and say, my legal recommendation is X, that can't be disclosed. You cannot waive the attorney-client privilege. There are certain things in, then there's a whole list of exceptions that will not be disclosable. Social security numbers. If somebody's social security number, if somebody wants a list of all the employees and their social security numbers, we can't disclose that. We'd have to redact all the social security numbers. There's another exception. It's called the deliberative consultative privilege. And what's the deliberative consultative privilege? It's it's generally among governing body members, and it would be governing body members deliberating among themselves in an email or in some type of letter prior to a decision being made. If the decision's been made, you can't say it's deliberative and consultative anymore because the decision was made. But if there is a decision about passing a certain policy and you have committee members emailing back and forth saying, I'm very opposed to this, I don't think this is a good idea, these are issues that I think we need to be concerned with, that's deliberations, that's not disclosable. But what I can tell you is courts look at that very, very narrowly. It really better be deliberative process. And so what I tell most of my governing bodies is, if you're going to have a conversation, don't email it. Pick up the phone. Talk to your fellow council person. Ask them and deliberate over the phone, or have a cup of coffee with them. Because then it doesn't find its way into an email where you have to have an attorney and a clerk make a decision of whether or not this is deliberative process. Now, what's the danger of all this? The danger of it under the Open Public Records Act is, if you get it wrong, you pay the other side's, the requester's legal fees. And the case that came out, a dear friend of mine actually was the one who argued it for the city of Hoboken and won. It's called Mason versus the city of Hoboken. Beth Mason is a councilwoman in Hoboken, very bright woman, and used Oprah requests quite a bit in Hoboken and still does. And the Corporation Council was involved in this case, and she filed an Oprah request. They produced records. She filed a lawsuit, and it went all the way up to the Supreme Court of New Jersey. And what the court held is that if the lawsuit that was filed is the catalyst for producing records, that in and of itself is enough to award attorney's fees to the other side. And the attorney's fees can be $3.50 an hour. The numbers can be huge. So I'll give you an example. I got retained by the town of Wayne. This was several years ago. And it was literally my first day on the job. I had just gotten there. I was the labor attorney. The town attorney left. And the mayor called me up and said, can you come to this meeting? We don't have anybody. Would you come in and fill in? Sure, I'll show up. So I sit down on the dais, and I'm up on the dais. I don't know anything going on. And they had a former clerk who had made a decision on an Oprah request, and I'll tell you about that in a second. A reporter comes up to me and says, well, what's going on with that Oprah request? This was at the same period when there was a lot of political turmoil going on. The lawsuit regarding the Oprah request. I said, a lawsuit regarding an Oprah request? I said, I don't know anything about it. I just got here. So I went over to the brand new clerk. I said, did you get served with a lawsuit about an Oprah request? Nope, not at all. I said, do you guys have a recent Oprah request about anything? Oh, yeah, there was an Oprah request about legal bills. They wanted the legal bills of so-and-so's law firm. So what did you guys do? Well, we denied the request as to the bills. We gave them the vouchers. Right then at that, so I found out about it from a reporter. I said, you're wrong. You're dead wrong. We have to produce the bills. Get me the bills tomorrow morning. We got the bills. I got the pile of bills. I went through and redacted the attorney-client privilege documents out. We then immediately sent it over to the requester saying it was done in error. It was a clerk who had made this decision. It was incorrect. So I've been there for 24 hours. After we sent out the bills, FedExed, we were served with a lawsuit 3 days later. The lawsuit was served on us after we had sent out the bills. The problem was the lawsuit had been filed the day before I had found out about it. So the day before I walked in on that dais, the person had filed a lawsuit in Superior Court but hadn't yet served it on the governing body. So no one even knew this lawsuit existed. The judge ultimately awarded, in that case, the guy got all the records. The judge said that that lawsuit was the catalyst. So, well, how was the catalyst? I didn't know about it. Some reporter said, I hear you're going to get sued. So I didn't even know the suit was being filed. The judge awarded legal fees in that case. It wasn't a lot of legal fees, but it shows you the person even had the records and a lawsuit came about resulting in legal fees. And there's a group of attorneys that make a lot of money doing this. So I'll give you probably the biggest legal fee case that's happened in New Jersey. Little town down, I think it's called Greenbrook, down in Middlesex County. The Gannett newspapers, if you ever go to the Daily Record or the Asbury Park Press, they have a data universe. The data universe, you can go online and find out what any public employee makes, their salaries. They've done Oprah requests and they've collected all this information. So you can find out what Jim Burnett makes. You can find out what Ray Cody makes. Any BA, DPW employee, there's this data universe. And the way they get these records is they would go and they'd do Oprah requests and they'd want the electronic copies of payroll records. Payroll records, by the way, are Oprahable. And they wanted it in electronic format, and the reason they wanted it electronically is they could just upload it to their data universe and make life real easy. They could then just track what people are making. What happened in Greenbrook is they gave them the payroll records. They printed them out from ADP and gave them a pile of payroll records. And the Gannett newspaper said, we don't want it in PDF copy or hard copy. We want it in electronic format. And they wrote back and said, we don't have an electronic format. ADP has an electronic format. And they wrote back and said, well, you can get it. Just request it. That's what we want. They refused. The town lost the case, and the judge said that they violated Oprah, and the mediator just awarded $565,000 to the requester. They talk about a budget buster. That's a pretty significant case. That's the most significant Oprah legal fee case that happened. They got the records, they just didn't get it in the right format. That's why this is so dangerous. So you, as volunteers, etc., you're here, you're trying to help out Madison. A couple things. If you don't want somebody to read about it, don't put it in an email. Don't put it in a text. If you do email, please use an official email address so that we can get the records, so that we have the ability to produce records if a request comes in, and that we have the ability to go through it in a timely fashion and redact. Because if we have to start contacting you at home and say, can you check your Gmail account, etc., it slows down the process. And we have a 7-day window, unless we get an extension, to produce those records. It's not to get the request. It's to get the request, get the records, redact them, and produce them. The law also requires that when you redact an email or you redact a record, you have to create what's known as a Vaughn index. You have to tell the requester, this email that you're getting with the blocked out lines, the reason it's redacted is it's attorney-client privileged or it's deliberative process. You have to give enough information to the redactor so they understand. You can't just hold back the emails and say, well, those are embarrassing emails. We're not going to produce those. Or that's attorney-client privilege. You have to tell them there is this document out there, but you can't have it because of one of these exceptions. And so we also, in that 7-day window, have to also create what's known as this Vaughn index, identifying the documents that we're not producing because we're asserting a privilege. And so these cases can become very, very dangerous. There's another law in New Jersey that's known as the Right to Know law. Now, the Right to Know law was the precursor to the Open Public Records Act, and it's even broader. It doesn't have an attorney fee provision, but it's even broader. So what most people do is they'll do an Oprah request and say, and consider this a Right to Know law. And the Right to Know law, and I'm not going to get into all the legal semantics with you, it's a broader review process. It's harder to exclude documents under the Right to Know law, so that we have to do an analysis and a balancing test before we can exclude something. And really the only things you can exclude are under that personnel files, so I can't give you somebody's, evaluation. That would be non-disclosable. Again, attorney-client privilege communications. But the deliberative process communications, where there's an exception under Open Public Records Act, it's even a narrower exception under the Right to Know law. And so when you get these requests, and generally the people who are doing these requests, they're not doing it because they want to be nice people, just know what's going on. It's the newspapers, it's political adversaries. I mean, the amount of Oprah requests that they're getting right now at, whether it's the Port Authority or the state, it's unbelievable. Any government entity gets lots and lots of Oprah requests, and it's usually not somebody who's looking to just, find out some information. They're looking to find out information so they can use it to their advantage. And there is a group, as I said, attorneys, this is all they do. Because if they catch you wrong, they get all their attorney's fees. And so it's become a cottage industry. The most incredible thing about the Open Public Records Act, this is something that drives me out of my mind, is that the people who drafted it are legislatures. They put it together, it's out there. You have certain legislatures who want to expand it and make it more comprehensive, less exceptions on disclosures. Guess who's exempt from the Open Public Records Act? Your legislatures. So if I want to write to one of your legislatures and say, please give me your emails, sorry, Oprah doesn't apply. So it's kind of like what we have down with Congress. The Affordable Care Act is good for everybody except us. It's one of those exceptions. You better follow these rules, but we don't have to. That drives me out of my mind. To me, if you're a public servant, a mayor and council, the governor, all these agencies, they're all subject to it, but not the legislatures. So that's just a little tidbit. The other thing that you've got to be cognizant of is under the Open Public Records Act, there's another law that you have to be very careful to think of. It's called the Open Public Meeting Act. And what the Open Public Meeting Act is, and I'll use the governing body here, we publish the list of meetings. It's in the official newspaper. It's posted. Everyone knows when the borough council and mayor are going to have a meeting. And the reason is that we have to let the world know, with open government, we're having a meeting. The purpose of it is they don't want to have secret meetings. They don't want to have secret backdoor smoke-filled room meetings where the public is excluded, because this is representative government. Under the Open Public Meeting Act, what happens is, to have a meeting, you have to have a quorum. And here, you have 6 council people here. So if we have a meeting one night and only 2 people show up, we can't start the meeting because we don't have a quorum. A quorum is a body where there's enough people, a majority of the whole, that have come before the meeting, who have the ability to vote and effectuate business. So why is this all important? The reason it's important is that if you have a quorum, so right here, we have 6 council people. Let's hypothetically say these 6 council people decide to start emailing. I email them out, town attorney, it attaches my legal opinion pursuant to what you wanted. And then we start having a communication back and forth, reply all, back and forth. Well, guess what we're having? We're having a meeting. Because we have a quorum, the meeting is happening virtually, it's over an email. We didn't advertise for it, we didn't disclose it, we didn't publish it, and we're having a meeting. And that's a violation of the Open Public Meetings Act. So what I tell people is when people are doing emails, don't hit reply all. If you could cross that off your computer or your iPhone, do it. Just hit reply. Because when you start communicating as a body, whenever I see that happening with any of my clients, I immediately write back on, you're in violation of the Open Public Meeting Act, stop this discussion via email. You have to have a meeting in the public. Because under the Open Public Meeting Act, as you know, you do have the right to go into closed session. You have a right to go into closed session. It's got to be published. You have to tell the world why you're going into closed session and what exception under the Open Public Meeting Act you're exercising to go into closed session to have this private discussion. Now, the simplest things to remember are if it deals with contract negotiations. So right now, Jim Burnett and I are involved in contract negotiations with various unions. We're not going to have that discussion up on the dais about the position that the borough's taking, what we want to advocate, because if we do that up here, You're going to have the PBA member sitting right there saying, pretty interesting. That's what they budgeted for that. So what you do under the Open Public Meeting Act, you have the right to go into closed session to have that discussion so that you don't give up your negotiations advantage. Another one of the exceptions is property acquisition. So let's say we're thinking about targeting Vic's property. We want to, get Vic's property. He has this big tract of land, and we want to get it, and we want to figure out, should we get an appraisal? And these are where the appraisals are. What should we offer? You can discuss that in closed executive session. Again, because if we have the discussion in public, it gives us an unfair advantage or a disadvantage to the person who we're going to try to acquire the property. So for strategic reasons, you can have those discussions in closed session while you're deliberating on negotiations over the acquisition of property, collective bargaining negotiations. One of the other big areas that you can go into closed executive session for is personnel. Now, personnel is a whole unique animal, but let's hypothetically say that, I'll use Jim Burnett because he's sitting right here. We're really unhappy with Jim Burnett because he wears these blue shirts all the time. We want white shirts. So what we do is, we as a governing body and the mayor, we can't just go into closed executive session and have a little discussion with Jim Burnett secretly. That's illegal. What we're required to do is to give Jim Burnett what's known as a Rice notice. Rice was a case that came out of Union County back in the 70s, but it's known as a Rice notice. And what it is we have to give it to the employee at least 48 hours in advance of the meeting, in writing, and say, Jim, we're going to be having a discussion about you next Monday evening in the meeting, in closed executive session, and that discussion could adversely affect your employment. You have the right to force us to have that discussion in public. So basically, you, employee, have the right to force us to have it occur in public, and you waive your right to privacy. If you don't, we're going to have that discussion, but you have to give them notice and the opportunity to have it in public or private. You'd ask yourself, why do you want to have it? But I'm billing you for 6 hours. So, you want to have that meeting in private. So why would an employee say, I want to do it in public? Well, it's real easy. I'll tell you, very often, you find this a lot of times in schools. I represent a lot of school districts, and if you have an employee who's going to get non-renewed, it's a third-year teacher, and you're going to ask them out the door, and you're going to have that discussion in private, often the employee will say, no, I want it in public. I want you to sit up on the dais and tell the world what's wrong with me, and I'm going to bring all of my friends, and I'm going to bring all of my supporters and parents, etc., to come and put pressure on you. That's why you do it. But the whole purpose of the law is we as a governing body can't go into executive session and have a discussion with an employee without their knowledge of it. Now, one last thing to wrap this up. We have to keep minutes of our meetings. You have to keep minutes of your public meeting, and you have to keep minutes of your executive session meetings. Most of the committees that you have really don't have a need to go in executive session. There's very few. If the lawyer's going to come and give you legal advice about one of the committees, we go into executive session. If you're a zoning board member and you're going to go into executive session with your zoning board attorney, that would be privileged. But you still need to have minutes that are sufficient. They don't have to be verbatim, but they have to be sufficient so that if somebody goes to look at them 3 or 4 years later, 5 years later, they can understand what was discussed. So it's not sufficient executive session, discussion, legal. That would be insufficient. It would be executive session, legal discussion regarding PBE negotiations and salary parameters. That would be sufficient. You have to keep those minutes, and you on these committees have to keep those minutes because, again, that goes back in. It's an open public record. We have to maintain it. We have to keep it. And so it's imperative if you're on these committees that somebody is taking minutes of those meetings so that you're in compliance with the Open Public Meeting Act. And ultimately, if there's a request for those records, we can respond to the Open Public Records Act. Do you want me to ask questions? Sing a song? All right. All right. Yeah, one question, go ahead. It's 7 work days. It's work days. So if you get the request, you're talking about the Open Public Records Act? It's business days, not calendar days. So, and it's when they're open. So if you have a snowstorm and you're not open, that doesn't count. There's certain exceptions. Very quickly, when you get the Open Public Record Act in, you can look at it and see if it's going to be voluminous. And what I always recommend is that we read back and say this is going to likely produce a lot of records, require a lot of review for possible redactions. We need an extra 2 weeks. And if the person says no, then you say you're an unreasonable requester and you have the right to deny it. So the whole purpose of it is to have communications with the requester to be reasonable and to produce these records. They're not published. They have to be what we do here at the governing body. As you see, usually at the beginning of every meeting, we accept the minutes to make them official minutes. So people will review them, accept them, and then they're official minutes, and they should be given over to Liz Osborne. Executive session minutes, same thing. You don't disclose them, though, because if it's we have minutes for every one of our executive session meetings, and you're not allowed to disclose them until the matter is no longer confidential. So, for example, if we're having the discussion in closed executive about secretly acquiring Vic's property, and then we acquire it, well, then that's no longer privileged communications, and that would then be able to be disclosed to the public. Yes, they do, as long as it's possible to produce it. So if they want it on disk, if they want it done electronically, if they want hard copies, that's up to the requester in what format they want. And the law also mandates what you can charge for it. You can charge, I think it's a nickel a page if you produce it. So virtually it's a very burdensome cost factor for a borough because you have to spend a lot of time getting it and then producing it, and the amount of money that you have to spend to get the documents is relatively low, and it's all set statutorily. But they can produce it electronically, and most places will say, send it to me electronically, and there's not much you can charge for that. I recommend that you do keep minutes on an ad hoc, just so that you have some discussion. An ad hoc is not an official committee. I mean, what we're talking here about is if you're the Environmental Commission, you're the Housing Authority, you're the Zoning Board, those by law have to keep minutes. An ad hoc committee, if you're having an ad hoc, it's not a legal requirement that they have to have minutes. The problem is that if you're having the meeting, I think it's important to just kind of memorialize. Again, it doesn't have to be verbatim, but it has to be enough that you have information as to what was discussed, etc. And those should all be transmitted over to Liz Osborne, so she has all these in one place in terms of minutes. Are you talking about?
Let's say I have an email account.
No. No, just anything that's related to borough business. Right. Right, and you'd be better off using an official email, getting, the IT here to set you up an email if you're a committee member, and just use that as your official email. Right.
The public shows up that evening, they want to let us take a look at this.
I don't know what kind of committee you're on. What are you?
Somebody has a
No, that would not That would not be a closed session discussion. That would not fall.
We could discuss it, and then
Right, yeah.
give them our decision later.
That's correct. But if somebody comes in and complains about there's a tree down in the park, you need to cut it up, it's a danger. That doesn't give you guys the right to go into closed executive session to talk about why is a tree there. That's not, that would fall within one of the exceptions under the Open Public Meeting Act. Yep.
Electronic copy of something. What's to prevent the user? Find a payroll record that's an electronic.
Well, I mean, that's why whenever we do an OPA request and we produce it, we keep a copy of what we've generated, so that if something comes out, we could then say that's incorrect. This is what the official record says. All right, so I'll turn it over. All right, sure. What carries greater importance? Well, they're both public records. You can't destroy one unless you have permission from the Division of Archive Records Management. I would say that what you should do is most people use the recording as a method, because it doesn't have to be verbatim, as a method to capture what was discussed at the meeting. And then once you've created the minutes and adopted them, you can then go to the Division of Archive Records Management and say, we now have adopted official minutes of that meeting. Do we have permission to reuse this tape or destroy it? And you can get that order from DARM. But once you've taped it, you guys don't have the right to retape over it. It's now a public record that we have to maintain until we get that permission. All right, so I'll turn it over to the mayor.
Thank you so much. It's a lot of information, and there are full-day programs on Open Public Meetings Act and Open Public Records Act, so I appreciate Matt trying to keep that concise and hopefully not scaring you too much. Just a couple of quick comments as a follow-up. Often people think about blind copy as a that you're sharing an email with someone and you're hiding something from the person you sent it to. I think with Open Public Meeting Records Act, there's a positive way to use it. And this is the way I send out emails to the council. So let's say I'm sharing a agenda item, just the background information on an agenda item before a meeting. I will send it blind copy to the mayor and council. Right at the top we'll say, this email is going as a blind copy to mayor and council, so I'm not hiding who I'm sending it to. Do not forward this and do not reply to anyone except for the sender. So that way the reply all only comes back to the sender. So I think it's a good tip to use, but don't hide the fact that who you're sending it to. So put right in there, sent as a blind copy to the Parks Committee, and that way when the reply all, you're not starting a discussion. Sort of correct. No, sorry. Yeah, that's so. Yeah, but at that point, and that's also the adding in that even though you send as blind copy, but throwing in by reply only to sender, so you have that extra level in there. Matt talked about RoseNet, so those from Chatham are saying, what is RoseNet? But so your email would not be on RoseNet. We do, in Madison, we allow every committee person to have a RoseNet account. That way they can have their own, keep their committee work separate from their personal account. Chatham, AJ set it up for us. So, we have the cloud version of Microsoft. So we actually do not have every committee member on. Right, yeah. Which is why I love 365, but it is a budget buster. So I think, in that case, if you are, no matter where you are, email accounts are free. Just set up your own, a separate one. So it's Bob Conley DDC so at least people know when they're responding to me, it is my Downtown Development Commission account. And it's a reminder to me that I'm only going to be communicating that way. So the ideal thing is having an account with the town, and if that can't be done, create your own to keep it separate, because you don't want to have to sit down and do that search through your AOL account with the pulling out all the junk mail you had in there. So with that, let's move on to Liz Osborne, who is the clerk here in Madison. It's been a pleasure. It's, Mayor Harris came in and said, who sits right up there? And the mayor sits there. Liz sits right next to me, and she keeps me on track. The clerk's job is incredibly valuable, and it is, just so you understand how law views the clerk is one of the few tenured positions in borough government, and that is to protect the clerk, because the clerk has to sometimes say, mayor and council, you're not following the rules, and we can't, the clerk can't worry about losing a job over that. So she is a tenured clerk.
Good morning. I didn't get a chance to speak before, but I'm not a volunteer here, but I am still happy to serve Madison, as all of you are. The attorney touched on several of the things. I feel like he did a job description of my job, because I spend my entire day working on the Open Public Records Act and the Open Public Meetings Act, but a few items I have that will be relevant to boards and committees. One of them, most important, is the Citizen Leadership Forum. The state of New Jersey, in their infinite wisdom, has come up with another statute for requiring anyone who volunteers to formally apply. It's not an actual application, but it's just a written record. So if you have any members that want to join your boards and committees, and this is all boards and committees, they really should fill out the citizen leadership form. I have copies here. Please take them and pass them around. We'll get more residents to volunteer. It's just a record. Then that way it's fair. The mayor and council get copies of it since they're doing the appointing, and this way there is a formal request to join. Once someone is on a board or committee, most boards and committees, the members need to take an oath. The chairperson can administer the oath, or I can administer the oath. Mayor can administer, and then the oaths are kept on file in the clerk's office. We have to, most of our boards and committees should be doing agendas, and they need to be timely. We can post them on Rosenet so that the public knows what it is you're going to be discussing at meetings. But agendas are very important, because if it's done well, it'll reduce the time of your meeting, avoid deviating from business, and keep an orderly process. This way everybody has feels they at least have a fair chance to have their topic or their position heard, and it does keep the meetings moving along. Like I said, if you'll send them to me ahead of your meetings, I can get them posted on Rosenet or post them here in the Borough Hall, and also distribute to the mayor and council. All right? And then minutes. After your meetings, we have to have minutes, and minutes can be very short. They really need to have just the time and place that you met, even if it's electronic, as the attorney touched on, the members that were present, the subjects you considered, any action taken, including the vote by the members. And again, those should be approved by the group at the next available meeting. And then if you send them to me, we'll get them to the mayor and council, and we can, in this municipality, we can post them on Rosenet for the public. And of course, they're public documents, and anyone can request one. So they don't have to be very elaborate. In fact, it's almost better if they're just a record of what actually happened. And the only other item I have is the financial disclosure statement. Several board and committee members have to disclose any financial resources. The state last year started a new online process for filing your financial information. It did not work very well, so they've gone out to hire a firm to look at a new process. We haven't heard anything yet from the state. So as soon as I have that, I'll be reaching out to all of you who need to file. And I believe it'll be online again, but hopefully this time it works. So you'll be hearing from me on financial disclosure. And the local government officers who need to file those are mayor and council, planning and zoning, health, library, some independent municipal authority members, and of course all the executive or confidential employees. And those are public records. disclosal under OPER. That's all the information I have today. Mayor will.
Questions for Liz? Right.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Oh. And please, if you have any questions, if you're ever in doubt or there's a question about anything to do with your meetings or minutes, please feel free to call me. And if I don't have an answer, I'll certainly get you one. Okay?
Thank you. Right now, we're going to be talking a little bit about running effective meetings. So, since you've been doing a lot of listening, we'll listen now. What are some of your meeting frustrations? Since most of you, whether you can pretend it's a hypothetical committee you're on or whatever. So, whatever meetings you've been in, any frustrations you've had, Bob? Too much talking. Other frustrations, Kathy? Getting off the agenda. Right?
Opposite ends. Don't say a word, don't contribute. Someone who absolutely hijacks.
Yep, the dominant and the quiet person. And other frustrations? I think I've got little things on virtually all of those, but I've got a little couple. Oh, Bob again? Length of the meeting, yes. Kathy again. That is a frustrating, yep, not taking it seriously, not showing up. So a couple pictures. The endless reports, the meetings, it's report after report. Oh my God. I read that stuff already and here they are reporting it again. I can't believe that guy is saying that again. Why don't you just get off that topic? Come on. Will this meeting ever end? It's going forever. And if you can read that, phew, that was close. We almost decided something. So another couple of quotes and a more positive. Any committee that is the slightest use is composed of people who are too busy to want to sit on it for a second longer than they have to. So kind of the, get off the people. They're very busy. Let's just get to the job. That's an effective group. People who enjoy meetings should not be in charge of anything. And I'm gonna fess up to something at this point because in my life with the YMCA, my life is driven by meetings. With my life with the borough, it's driven by meetings. I took one of those personality tests at one point, not the Myers-Briggs, but another version. You know how when you take it and then they talk about the various characteristics of your personality. And right there in the middle of the page was hates meetings. But I realized I could use that to a positive thing because, yes, meetings are my life, and I don't hate them, but I will make sure they keep moving along. So what I'm going to share here is adapted from how to organize and run effective meetings. It was from University of Nevada, Reno. And if you want more information and have photographic memory, there is the link right at the bottom there. And just a disclaimer that not all these tips and suggestions translate to municipal committees because, there are some committees that are very structured. Planning board, zoning board, there are some things you have to follow. Other committees have more of a leeway as to how they can attack the process. Purpose. We talked about, meetings and not deciding things. If all of a sudden you realize you have a meeting and you don't need to meet, cancel it. Don't get together and there's nothing to cover. But if you notice month after month, unless you're a statutory committee and you haven't met because there's nothing to talk about, you might want to go back to the borough and say, I think we've run the length of our committee. There's nothing else to do. We're patting ourselves on the back and we're going to disband. Make sure you have a goal. What are the decisions going to be made in that meeting? And what information needs to be exchanged, and that's very important because you saw that the people with their heads down, if you're going to spend the first 45 minutes just exchanging information so you can have a 10-minute discussion, it's not an effective meeting. If you get that information out ahead of time, we're all adults, we should do our homework in advance. Structure. There is no set structure that will meet every possible meeting. You know, some groups, like Environmental Commission, may bring in speakers periodically. Some might be very free-flow brainstorming sessions. You know, let's just say whatever we want, we'll write it on the board. Some committees will never use some of these, and some will go back and forth. Some will stick with all of them together, or do different versions in the same meeting, having discussions, demonstrations, sharing information. Obviously, a lot of sharing is going to happen in a committee meeting. That's why you're there. Running effective meetings. Time. We heard the comments. Meetings that go too long. Begin and end on time, because you don't want to punish those that are there on time. And you'll notice that if all of a sudden, well, 3, 4 people are always 10 minutes late, so we'll start at 9:10. Those 3, 4 people, guess what? After a while, they're going to start coming at 9:20 because they know it starts at 9. And so now you're punishing those that are good, and the time keeps drifting. Start on time. Obviously, you have to have a quorum if you're that type of committee. Be productive in your time. Have a working agenda with a time frame. Depending on the committee I'm running, the meeting I'm running, sometimes it'll just be an agenda with the items. Sometimes I will actually put the time frame so people come into the meeting and say, all right, we're planning on spending 10 minutes on this one topic. So they can set their mindset thought and say, all right, I'm going to be concise. Oh, this is going to be, it's 45 minutes. This is going to be a major discussion topic. So they'll come prepared for a major discussion if you throw the times on there. And allow for unfinished business. There's nothing wrong with adjourning the meeting and still having work to do. To go 2, 3 hours because you want to get that last thing done is not going to be helpful. At the Y many years ago, I had a staff person fairly new and learning how to run meetings. And she said, we had a great meeting last night, 2.5 hours long. And I said, 2.5 hours long? That's way too long. You've got to keep it to an hour, hour and a half. She said, but the last hour was so productive. Well, if the committee knew that the meeting was only going to be an hour and a half, I bet you the first hour would have been far more productive. And what good is an agenda if people don't know what it is ahead of time? So prepare it, get it out to everyone at least 2 days ahead so they can absorb it. They might want to send back suggestions to the agenda. Be clear. If someone needs to report on something, nothing worse than to have an agenda item and you get to the meeting and said, Bob, are you ready for agenda item 3? I said, wait a minute, I didn't know I was responsible for that. If you're going to expect people to be responsible for a section, make sure their name is next to it. And just as we did today, review the agenda at the beginning, just as a reminder. Yeah, it's written down. We have it right in front of everyone. But these are things we're going to go over. And again, if you've assigned time frames, that's a good time to say, all right, we're planning on spending about 15 minutes on item number 2, and number 3 will be about 5 minutes. So review and ask, if there are any questions or additions to the agenda. And you may have to say, well, we can't fit that item in. We'll push it to the next meeting. And then stay on task. You've set the agenda. Obviously, have objectives for that meeting. You want to get through it. Kathy made the people that take you off task. What do? If you have something like that, that's a great idea. We'll write that down. Don't start discussing that item that was off task. Write it down, and you have your idea bin. Save that for later. Ground rules are always a good thing to have. So everyone, again, knows what the rules are when they're in committee, and sometimes you may have the committee put them together themselves. We talked about arriving on time, and that we're sticking to the agenda. Everyone should have a chance to participate, that we want to be, we'll be realistic with follow-up tasks. Remind people that you're focusing on interests, not positions. Trying to separate people from the problem. Damn, that Bob Conley keeps bringing the same thing up and over again. Well, listen, don't put it on Bob. Listen to the problem so you can figure out what is going on there. respect different viewpoints. Always remind people, the reason we have a committee is because we got here for different reasons. So that's ground rule. We'll respect each other's opinions. And make sure all committee members understand are responsible for ground rules. And any other ground rules that you would throw into a committee meeting? All right. We heard this comment, the person that dominates. As a chair, you've got to make sure you're giving everyone a chance. So if you have that dominant person, you may have to try to pull the other people in and even be respectful of someone's comments without cutting them off impolitely, but just say, we need to share John's ideas right now. And you may have to bring, the person that's quiet, barely shares in a meeting, you may have to say, Bill, what do you think about this? Try to pull them in to the conversation. And maybe even if you have to have a discussion with them offline and say, I noticed you're quiet. Some people are sponges and that's the way they want to be in the committee, but you might want to find out why they're quiet and they're not sharing. And the same thing on the dominator. If it's time after time they're dominating, you may have to talk to them offline and say, just so you may not realize it, but some people we can't get their opinions in because you're not giving them a chance. If you can just slow down a little bit, or maybe instead of being the first one to start talking, can you be the second or third? And at the end of a meeting, you want to summarize. What were the discussions? Very important, what decisions did we make? And if you are doing formal minutes, obviously you've got the formal minutes, but we talked about the ad hoc committee. So maybe you're not doing formal minutes, but what you want to do is, what did we decide? So we're going to record that. Who's going to do what? Action. We've got these things to do before now and the next meeting, or if it's a special events committee, obviously a special event's coming up, who's going to do what on these milestone moments leading up to the event? I talked about the delegation, deadlines. Be very clear. If you're going to send out tasks, you don't want to leave it open because you're setting yourselves up for failure. Because now your next meeting and Bill says, well, I'm still working on it. I said, well, we needed that information last time. And if you were clear with the deadlines, it probably would have been done. I talked about the idea bin. So those things that came out completely off topic, you wrote them down. Go ahead and spend some time to review that. Okay, we're going to put alternate side of street parking in. All right, well, how are we going to discuss that? Well, I don't know where I came up with that one right now, but yes. But anyway, so pull those things out, make sure they're not forgotten. And if it was an idea that has nothing to do with your committee, maybe suggest to that committee person that we're going to hand off that idea to the XYZ committee so they can work with it. And if you are a advertised committee, obviously you have already a list of your meetings. If you're an ad hoc committee, you may just need to say, all right, we're going to confirm the next meeting. You probably, the last thing you want to do is walk out and say, oh my God, we didn't confirm that. Now you're going to have the emails going back and forth as to when we're meeting. And remember those meeting killers. All reports and no discussion. Drifting off the agenda. How about that snow? Let's stay on the topic. Overstaying your welcome. Ooh, it's 3 hours now. We got another hour to go. Let's just keep on going. No accomplishments. I'm in the process of working with Little League, coaching, training Little League coaches. I say you don't judge your success as a coach by your win-loss record. You judge it by how many people are still in the Little League the next year. With no accomplishments, you can judge your success as a chair, because with no accomplishments, you're probably not going to have any members in a couple of years. So, just that is a key thing. And the Groundhog Days meetings, which I brought up last year because we did it on Groundhog's Day, but every meeting discussing the same thing again. Fifth time, it's April, May, June, and the agenda hasn't changed. That's not going to help you. Make sure you're moving on. Any questions or thoughts on running Effective meetings, Kathy? Yeah. Uh, you could, in my experience, I've, one of two ways, or one alternative would be is, in addition to minutes, is have a separate distribution, which is action steps. Because the minutes have far more, the minutes of the last meeting were approved, the treasurer's report was covered, and all of a sudden, depending what type of personality they are, you have the person that's read everything, and they say, oh yeah, I've got to do number 3. And then there's other people that say, well, I know so-and-so is going to worry about the minutes, I'm not going to read it. So you have that separate thing, which is the action steps. And so this is what we decided, what the task is, who's going to do it, and the deadline. And so I think that's a good way to do it. And again, even going back to ad hoc committee that you heard that you don't necessarily do minutes, I would say forget about the minutes, just do that action step list. Other questions about Bob? Yep. And so, yep, so you can add that as, the agenda, the minutes of the previous meeting will certainly drive the agenda of the next meeting. So put that in there. Yep. Yep. And it is the challenge of a chair to balance that of staying on the time frame and also giving people respect to share their opinions. Joe?
Yeah, I was just going to make a comment.
Yep. Yeah, that is a very important state. You are, as chair, setting the tone. Mayor Harris and I have that challenge that, when we're up, we are setting the tone. But you also have to be flexible, because if we're stuck in our ways, my personality may not be right for every committee's job, and I may have to shift to match it. Because obviously, leading zoning board of adjustment is different than leading the DDC. You have to set different tones, and so you do have to go out of your comfort zone to make sure you're meeting the goal of that committee. And a 4-2 vote is not a divided board. A 4-2 vote is people that were able to speak their piece and making sure they got their voice heard. But how that 4-2, what happens after that 4-2 vote is what defines a divided board. John, you?
Yeah, I guess
Yep.
part of, because of public input that a chairperson becomes the
And
we live in a
yeah,
society
yeah,
and we have diversity.
yep. And I think using the Supreme Court as an example, they take a vote. Does the minority now shut down? No, there is the minority decision is written out, so their voice is heard. So I think you can use that as a guideline to make sure, no matter what the final decision is, because very rarely is it black and white. There's a whole lot of more gray in what we do in committees.
One of the other things that always concerns count on them to be the conduit. Here at meetings, we do our best to run our council.
And I'm sure it's similar in Chatham where you'll have a council liaison to every committee, and you do feel a different level of importance on how often you see your liaison, and do we actually have that conduit back to the, and I know there are some challenges in Madison, so I'll have to work on those, Mary. Um, yeah. Yeah, for Matt, we have a backup for each, and so what it is on me as mayor to work through and say, if you can't make the meetings, let's see if we can use the backup person. And certainly, the way it works in Madison, there's categories with each assignment. So we have what we call some of our free agent assignments where a council member can pick because that is their interest. For the most part, they fall within, if you're utilities, you're going to get a certain list of committees, if you're community services and so on. And so some of those may not be high on their priority, and that's fine. But it's up to us to make sure we have the backup or even, or someone at least attending. So yeah, we've got a few we got to work on here. Paul?
Member of the public bringing a complaint. Oh, I want to know how the committee. Start this all over again. We try to avoid this and say.
I guess that certainly in council minutes, you would see what the actual vote is, and
The vote should be recorded.
vote should be recorded, but not to the.
It's a formal action if
Yeah.
there was a
So
motion
so
and a second.
so basically.
Find out how council can.
Yeah, right.
As a committee.
Yeah, well, if you have a vote, it should be in the minutes, and so if they're asking on what happened is, you're not going to tell them this is how. It's. I believe.
Depends on what, if you're asking a general consensus of the group, do we agree that this tree should come down or something like that? General consensus can just be written, the group agreed to, or there was no objection to, if someone didn't object. But if someone makes a motion and then there's a second, you have to record the vote of each member. Yeah, each member's vote is recorded, and that's the bulk of what your minutes should contain. If you have formal action that way.
Yeah. So usually someone complains about the tree, so you're talking about the tree and you decide there's not going to be any action.
Yeah, there was
in the
agreement not
minutes
to remove
in the minutes
it,
where consensus, no action. If someone says I make a motion that we will not take any action on that tree, second discussion vote, now the vote is being recorded in the minutes.
Right, and then that does, you do use the members.
And you put the members on how they voted. Yep. Vic? Okay.
What, do I then record John voted yes, Mary voted
it probably should be committee members' names and their
Yep.
vote next to it.
So yes, and list them, no, list
Should
them.
be in alphabetical order.
Very, middle initial.
That's Robert's rules, by alphabetical order, right?
Kathy? I think if we reach, I think one is, if you have a council liaison that's not showing up, is call, and it could be, on a, not accusatory phone call, but just, the last meeting we covered such and such, we're meeting, are you going to be able to make the next one? And all of a sudden comes out in the conversation, I really won't be able to make any of them because I have a standing conflict. Well, then it would be good for them to reach out to the alternate, but you could offer, should I reach out to the backup? And then it also comes to me eventually. Tony? It in a way, it depends on the meeting, yeah, they don't, typically would not be at every one of them, but make an appearance. There are some meetings, committee. Yeah. Eh, Yeah, and, and for Madison, there are some assignments that are very heavy with it, and you just can't do it. And my days as council member, I couldn't do them all, but there should be the feeling that you have a conduit. So, even if they say I can't make the meetings, and you're fine with the fact that they can't make it, having that communication is good. There are some committees that it is more important, such as, because some of it's in Madison, it's not just a liaison, they're actually a voting member. Board of Health, the council member to the Board of Health is a member. Planning Board, the council member is a member. So obviously they have made a commitment to be an active member of that committee. Others, they are exactly what it says, a liaison. Any other? And then we'll move on there.
Hopefully you won't have that. So,
Okay, we're going to do one last thing, and you're going to get to move around a little bit. She's been sitting, is in groups of 3 or 4, and not with more than one person on your own committee, and let's get the towns mixed up a little bit. Get together and just talk about what committee you're on and your goals for the year. And some of these committees' goals for the year are very easy. Other committees, such as Zoning Board of Adjustment, it's a little tougher to talk about goals for the year. So you can share other things, maybe the challenges or some of the big things that are coming up. So we'll just spend about 5 minutes on this. So again, get together, groups 3 or 4, share your committee, and here's the tough part though. When we regroup, we'll quickly go through, and you're just going to talk about someone else in your committee, not about yourself. So you're going to introduce someone else and just say their committee and one goal, not more than that. All right? Go to it. So we'll have the microphone go around again. As I said, introduce or talk the person you talk to, and if you've got a committee goal out of them, share that. Or if you've got another good tidbit about their committee work, you can share it. So it's a little free flow, but again, just try to keep it 1 or 2 sentences about what you learned about their committee. Before we do that, I just want to introduce a person that never gets seen, attends every council meeting, but never gets seen on camera because he's always behind the camera, and that is Robert Kopash, who videos all our meetings. And he offered to cover this meeting as a volunteer today, so greatly appreciate it, Robert. Thanks a lot. John, we'll start on this side.
Well, I'll let a member from our group here introduce what we discussed, because she had a pen and a paper, and we want to keep it brief.
I got to be recording secretary for our little group because I had the silly idea of bringing along a pencil and paper. First, I'd like to introduce John Solu. Please stand up again, John. John is on the Historic Preservation Commission, and their goal is to help preserve the historic assets of Madison. Okay, next I'll go to Lois Bott, a fellow commissioner on the Madison Housing Authority. A goal here is to create more affordable housing as well as complying with all the onerous and numerous requirements of HUD, which is the main funding source. Who else was I? Oh, Pat Sherwood, there you are. Pat is on the Patriotic Celebration Committee, and they're involved in getting parades and other celebrations of patriotic events like Memorial Day and Veterans Day. Now for myself, I decided I would be the Zoning Board of Adjustment for this purpose. My personal goal for this year in terms of zoning, because we have a fabulous chair, yay Joe. We stay very well on target. We do a really good job. Now I digress. If we were at the meeting, Joe would put me right back on target. But I would like to better understand how the master plan relates to some of the things we're doing. And I think we've made some real progress in that in the last few months. We've been getting more involved with discussions with our planner on how certain elements of the master plan are involved, because we want to keep Madison the wonderful place it is to live. So thank you, everybody. Who's next?
Well, we were talking about zoning and environmental commission, and so Mary's on environmental, and obviously they want to further the environmental needs of the town, and so good decision making around that. They have they give input to the various boards like planning and also zoning, and so that's their. I guess your objective is really to get better at that. Continue to move things along.
Well, didn't you mention specific objectives? I mean, that's pretty general. I think one this year that we're really hoping that will occur is more of an emphasis on composting, and we're encouraging it within the school system, the public schools. So there's talk about private-public partnership to get a grant for composting the food in cafeterias. So I think that's pretty much ongoing, and all relate to recycling, et cetera. And of course, we're interested in hopefully getting solar energy instituted.
The Parks Committee goals this year, we're starting the restoration of the Cole Park Fountain. There's one trail remaining at Summerhill Park to be opened up that goes back to Sandy. Question of what are we doing with some of the trees that are downed? Do we haul them out? Do we cut them up and leave them? Some of the neighbors are concerned that there's a fire exposure with all of the brush being left, so there's two sides to that. We're working with the Historical Preservation Committee on the restoration of the Luke Miller Forge. We're looking to replace cherry trees at James Park. There's a few of them that are getting quite old and straggly and need to be replaced. We're working with the Garden Club on that. We're working with a lot of the other groups because we have very little money. What we'd love to do is get into that open space money to start some other projects, such as a new shelter at Memorial Park to replace the one that was 50 years old and finally taken down because of the rot on the logs around it.
I'm a member of the Parks Committee, but also the Open Space Committee. I would encourage everyone who is in a borough entity to take a look at funding from the Open Space Committee. There's an application form. There are certain things that are not applicable, but it is a source of funding for some special projects, and we're going to be looking at maybe applying for funds for the shelter, and also Luke Miller for the Forge. So.
All right, the seniors, since I'm on the advisory committee, we're trying to have a program to invite seniors and also the caregivers to explain how legally things can be done to help seniors, and also make sure they get the help they need. We're trying to work with the county on that.
Shade Tree Management Board plans to continue monitoring for hazardous trees and planting opportunities. We're continuing to recover from Hurricane Sandy, and we're planning on planting 102 trees in 2014 on the borough streets and in the public right-of-way and in the parks.
Have a free flow going here, so whoever, not everyone has to speak, but whoever has a goal to share or who hasn't had a chance, make sure we get it.
Thank you. An initiative was started in the borough called Strategic Planning for this year, and it's got 4 parts, of which Tony DeRosa and I are on one, which is the Operations Committee. And we wish Maureen was here, but Maureen Byrne, who chairs the committee. But in lieu of her, let me just share with you that we had a meeting last week, and our 2 goals that we have for this year, two minimal goals that we have, we're going to have a lot more, are to communicate better, how to communicate better to the citizens of Madison, number 1, and so that, and 2, to get more citizens involved in what we're doing. As you know from the workshop we had on the budget, the town meeting, there were 7 people that showed up, and I expected this room to be packed today, frankly. So we're looking to see how we can get more people involved, and we're going to do surveys. We're looking at doing surveys of the citizens. We're going to be talking to the council members, so like that. Okay, those are the 2 main things that we want to do right now.
Thank you, John. And talking about how committees work differently, John talked about their goals for the year. Well, actually, that's the goal for the life of the committee, because once they finish strategic planning, they will hand it off to the borough, and we'll have a guideline for coming years, and their work is done. And that's some committees are like that.
Yeah, in our group, we had Mike Barrasso, who is the chair of the community garden, and Vic Schumacher, who is the chairman of the adult school, Madison and Chatham's, right, Vic? And Florham Park. And we were just talking about the challenges of having so many committees and so many members and so many volunteers here in town, and would be a great thing to have a networking event or a meeting maybe once every 2 months, so all the committee chairs can get together in one room and share their goals, their challenges, and their issues. It doesn't have to be that often, because we're all pretty much spread pretty thin with all of our volunteer hours, but just so we can understand each other's positions on the certain committees. That would be both nonprofit and borough.
Excellent. Anyone else needs to share or introduce? And covered everyone? Any other questions on the whole process? Next slide is a little feedback, which I'll take. But before Mayor Harris left, and I think we scared all the Chatham people away, but we did have a conversation. I think he really appreciated the invitation, and I think what we're going to do in the coming years is work together. What I did this year is we had set the date, and then I invited Chatham. I think we will work together on a date, and since this is a workshop, that I think it's helpful to be here every year, because of what was just brought out, the sharing of goals and objectives. But part of it is repetitious, so we'll probably maybe alternate between a weeknight in one year and a Saturday morning in another year, so we can work with people's schedules. But I think we will do more with Chatham. I think it's great. As I said, Mayor Harris had to leave, but every time we get together, we talk about what our best partner has been Chatham Borough. I think the two towns really set the tone as far as shared services, and having our committees get together will take that to another level. So I'll take, I did invite Florham Park, so I will, yeah, good question. I didn't mean to diss them. I will, Mark Taylor and I, actually every time Mark Taylor and I get together, he has to point out that I was his camp counselor. I'm not that much older than him, but so we do have a good working relationship with Florham Park, and I will, try to. They were not able to send anyone, but we'll try to get them because yes, would be if we possibly, that would be the idea since we recorded it, get it up on Rosenet, and so people can do their own little session at home for parts of it. We'll announce it on Rosenet. No, sorry. We'll get the word out. We also we capture everyone's names here, and I will. What we're going to do this year is get to you a certificate of completion because you dedicated your time, and you're now trained as a better chair, and so we'll get that out too. And since we have that, we'll get the word out when we have the recording on Rosenet. Chris. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot, as I said, we could do a full day session on just that and the information that's online. Yeah, then, yeah, so take advantage of the additional resources. If you didn't get the handout that Matt shared. What I would also ask you to do, again, if you want to share any thoughts on this session today, I'm happy to take it, but you can do it anonymously by going to surveymonkey.com/S, Madison-Chatham Leadership Workshop. We'll get this, since we have your information, if can't write that down, we'll get that link out to you also. But it'll help us tweak the presentations as we go through. Any feedback, that you want to share on the process or any of the questions? In that case, as we said, I can't thank you enough for what you do, so thank you. Again, spending a couple hours on this Saturday morning here, volunteering, taking a leadership role, and making our communities a better place. I truly appreciate it. There's more food out there too.